Wonderful. Hi everyone, thank you so kindly for joining us. I'm Cara Johnson, I'm the events coordinator for Green Apple here, and I am delighted to welcome you to the celebration of Alta's latest issue, Epic Tales of Survival. Let's cheers to Alta, give them a big hand. We are celebrating tonight with some of the Alta team, alongside contributors Peter Fish, Keenan Norris, and Matthew Zapruder. Let's give a hand for all of them as well. I am a big Alta Journal fan. I'm very excited to have them in the house this evening, and I'll let the Alta team kind of talk a little in more detail about what offerings they have for us this evening. But I wanted to say welcome to those of us that are joining us in the store and online. There's also plenty of chairs, don't feel free to get comfortable and make friends with someone you don't know. You can sit on the chairs here as well. But thank you for those of you joining us in person and also online. Hello, online audience. We're broadcasting from San Francisco. We are on unceded Winnebago Ohlone land, and we hope you join us in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into action by either donating your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. Thank you. Very brief business before I hand it over. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Picture taking is highly encouraged, and as long as it's okay with our authors. And please do check our event calendar out on greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event that you are currently attending. So if you happen to be here because you are interested in this evening's event, you might like what else we have going on in the coming season. The restroom is behind us. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. It is only available for attendees of our event during event time. It is the one space in the store that our employees have off of the floor, and we try and maintain its integrity, so thank you for respecting that, and we'll make it available after the event, I promise. Thank you also for buying books from us. We have books from both Keenan Norris and Matthew Zapruder here this evening at the front register. You can find them there. If you've been here before, you've definitely heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, but you also support the authors who put so much work into writing these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. And the cherry on top of that this evening is that we have issues of issue 23, is it issue 23? Issue 23 of Alta, Epic Tales of Survival, up at the front as well. And then Eliza in the back here is our membership coordinator for the evening. If you'd like to get not only the most recent issue, but also a couple of back issues. And I'm not going to pretend like I know all of the fun goodies that come with a membership. I'll let Eliza do that. But suffice it to say, there's a hat, which is very exciting. So fun goodies if you sign up for a membership this evening. And without further ado, I am going to go ahead and I'd like to welcome Blaise Zaraga, who is the editorial director at Alta. Let's get a hand for Blaise.
Thank you so much, Car, and everyone at Green Apple for welcoming us into their home tonight. And thank you, everyone, for coming, please. It's really just great to see quite a few contributors and family and friends and so on. Actually, I don't have any family here. Everyone's family. So the idea behind Alta Issues parties, this is our third time we've done it, was could we, bring together people, so foster some kind of sense of community, and do it at a bookstore as well, and have contributors read from their works in the current issue, with the idea being that, as Carr was saying, could we help our contributors by helping sell their books, help the bookstores by helping sell books. We could not survive without our bookstores. Alta, that's where all our single issue copies are sold. In fact, if you buy issues tonight, any single issues, all the proceeds go to Green Apple or any other independent bookstore in the Bay Area, for that matter. Tonight, if you do subscribe, there is a hat, as Cara mentioned. There's also a guide to bookstores as well. So you could leave tonight with a current issue, a book, and a hat. Trust me, we're losing a lot of money on the deal. What's that?
We're already subscribers.
Talk to Bill.
So,
Have a glass of wine. Have a glass of wine. There's wine and sparkling water. All right, and so anyway, that's it. So we're going on 6 years. In fact, issue 24 is at the press right now. So we made it to 6 years. And tonight is issue 23, Epic Tales of Survival. And we'll have 3 contributors read tonight. And the format will be, I'll introduce the writer. We'll get up and read 5 minutes or so, something like that. Then we'll go to the next writer and so on. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end as well for everybody. And throughout, we'd love it if people introduce yourselves to one another, to a number of Alta people here, Eliza, Beth, and just try to get to know each other and hang out for a little bit. Okay? All right, so the first person is Keenan Norris. And Keenan is a novelist, an essayist, and a scholar. He's a teacher or professor at San Jose State. His latest novel is The Confessions of Copeland Kane, which we reviewed. He joined us for an Alta Live. I first had the privilege of publishing a story called One Coyote, which won a 2021 Folio Award. And then most recently, he won a 2021, 2022, last year, National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Award for a story about Ayodele Nzinga, who's the Poet Laureate of Oakland. It's called She Who Remembers. Highly recommend it. Recommend anything Keenan writes. These are these writers who, he says, hey, I want to write about something. I'm going to say, yes, please. And so his most recent book, which is, please buy his book. It's up near the cash register. Chai Boy, Native Sons, and Chicago Reckonings. It's a nonfiction story, book of blending essay, history, and memoir. He's also published a novella, Luster. I don't know if we have copies of that here, but we should. Find it. So he published a special report in January. It's actually not in this issue, but it's so amazing that we wanted to ask him to read tonight. It's about California's community colleges. And he took a road trip, the mother of all road trips, around the state, visiting different community colleges, speaking with students, speaking with the presidents of those institutions, and lived to tell about it. So, would you please call up in? Yeah.
all right, well, thank you to everybody. Thank you to Alta, Blaze, everybody who, and everybody who is here. So, all right. An Alta Journal special report, A State of Extremes. With about 2 million enrolled students, California's community colleges constitute the largest higher education structure in the United States and one of the largest in the world. It's a system in which I taught in both Northern and Southern California across 5 college districts on 9 campuses over the course of more than 10 years. I've come to see it all as one vast, multi-perspectival prism through which to view the state of our state, which is why this past August, 2022, in the same week that President Joe Biden enacted controversial student loan forgiveness legislation, I decided to travel California's freeways, streets, mountain passes, and farm worker fields from San Diego to Sacramento to learn what these schools could teach me about California and its communities. This is a portion of that journey. San Diego City College. It started like this. I Googled San Diego CC. And the top search result was the San Diego Country Club website. An algorithmic impossibility, I figured. In one corner, you have a private club frequented by maybe a few hundred members at most. And in the other, according to the San Diego Community College District's Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Research, you have an unduplicated headcount of 21,835 students enrolled at the City College during the 2021-22 academic year. When you link that number with the rest of the district's community colleges, you get 67,647 students who are regularly traversing the city commons, physical and virtual. City College just had to be the more Google populace, right? But as I performed the search again and again, nothing changed. So I decided I would schedule a visit to the country club to see what made it the destination of the masses. Thankfully, signing up for a tour, I know this is like deep research, right? Thankfully, signing up for a tour didn't require a review of my finances. Let's just say my salary and worldly possessions can't quite accommodate the $30,000 initiation fee, $1,150 monthly dues, and $1,200 annual food and beverage minimum payment for the individual equity membership. Meanwhile, I've aged out of the cheaper junior executive membership, which is available only to those ages 21 to 39 with a $15,000 initiation fee and $670 monthly dues. If I moved into a student hostel, I could afford the basic national membership. But I've also aged out of having 6 roommates. What I haven't aged into is getting rich. Community college students are much younger, but they also tend to be a lot poorer than their professors, which suggests the schism between San Diego's 2 very different CCs. This class divide is why, as I waited for my lift, I frantically Googled what score would make a plausible golf handicap for someone like the person I was pretending to be. San Diego, like all our state's border towns, is a dual citizen, both Mexican and American. A fact that became apparent as my lift left the immigrant-heavy outskirts of the city and neared the country club, which was decidedly wider and richer. At the gated entrance, an attendant stepped out from his kiosk blocking our way. I explained that I had an appointment. The attendant gestured for the lift to turn around and leave and for me to pass through the wrought iron gates and enter the dark mouth of a grand building beyond which I could see lay the vast golf course. But before I could step inside the sanctum, I realized I'd left my phone in the lift. I turned back with some dignity, which meant I moved too slowly. My ride was gone and the phone with it, neither of them ever to be seen again. Oh, no. Mission aborted. I gazed at the distant greens and the rolling fairways and thought how it might be nice if City College's students had a little bit of all this. San Diego City College is the taxpayer-propelled antithesis of the country club. The campus weaves its concrete cord between corporate skyscrapers and high-rise, high-rent apartment complexes. Down on the ground on the first day of classes, proud parents pose their freshman children before campus landmarks and snap photos. 2 girls rotate around a planter box filled with succulents and take their own pictures. They love wildlife, they tell me, as they share their captures of grasshoppers perched on green stalks and butterflies poised on flower petals. Meanwhile, the Bank of America building and the Beacon Apartments and City College's own massiveness rise above. A few minutes later, a black man with a marijuana flower necklace, graying dreads, and the beginnings of a cataract in one eye shows me the way to the office of the president. In terms of the college mission, it really is social justice and educational equity. So we've got a swag to us at San Diego City College, where we transform students in a very intentional way. President Ricky Shabazz told me in May, both on Zoom and in person, Shabazz radiates intellectual energy. As conversant in world systems theory as in enrollment numbers, he is an impressive administrative mind. But more notable are students like Alexander Damas, who appreciates the many services at City College, while also noting that the school's quote-unquote biggest challenge will be navigating between online and in-person classes, quote, to help our fellow students bloom after such a hard couple years. So it's with more than a little sadness that I share here the primarily COVID-induced dwindling of City College's enrollment, down approximately 2,500 economically and otherwise imperiled students since the start of the pandemic. On this muggy morning, I'm showered with stories of time lost, of trajectories diverted. Not despite, but because of the difficulties of the past 3 years, Shabazz's plans remain ambitious. City College's no tuition approach, the product of the San Diego Promise program, may draw more students to the school. Shabazz sees this policy as a harbinger of the greater role community college can play in U.S. higher education. Quote, we have to start making a case for community colleges offering bachelor's degrees, he told me. That is the next phase of this no tuition approach, end quote. I leave San Diego with my mind mixed. President Shabazz's vision is a necessary confrontation with a California that is intentionally evacuating its working class, cynically employing social justice jargon to obscure the increasing inequity on the streets. As luxury high-rises go up in downtowns across the state, their shadows obliterate the plight of low-skilled labor and the unhoused below. Thank you.
So, thank you, Keenan. And when it gets to Q&A, someone asked him about the next college he visited and what happened when he Googled them. Okay, the next contributor, please, is Peter Fish. He is a longtime editor and writer, a real fixture in the Bay Area literary scene. He's a judge of the California Awards, long time, like 25 years, executive editor, travel editor of Sunset Magazine, you know, the old Sunset Magazine when it was great. He is very modest. I know he's edited several anthologies, including the California's Best, 2 Centuries of Great Writing, that came out in, I think, 2009. Check that out. He's going to be on Alta Live tomorrow. It's one of our weekly programs we do every Wednesday at 12:30. And he'll be discussing the same story he's going to read tonight. So if you don't get a question answered tonight, you can chime in. Beth is the host of that. Do that. And he also he teaches at Stanford Continuing Studies. He reviews books all the time for the Chronicle. And he's just a great guy. So Peter, please.
Well, thank you, Blaze. Thank you, Green Apple, our neighborhood bookstore. Really happy to be here. Not spending money, although I'll probably spend money in a few minutes. So anyway, this piece is in the current issue of Alta. It's called Imperial Dreamer, and it is about someone I have been obsessed with for the last decade. Harold Bell Wright, a preacher turned novelist who became the most successful, influential California writer whom absolutely nobody has heard of today, and how his 1911 best-selling novel, The Winning of Barbara Worth, facsimile first edition here, which celebrated bringing Colorado River water to the Imperial Valley down near the Mexican border, helped convince California that it could turn all of its deserts into gardens of Eden with water imported from someplace else, which explains a lot about where we are today. So I'm going to start with Harold Bell Wright arriving in the Imperial Valley in 1907. Wright arrived in the Imperial Valley at an opportune time, transforming himself as the valley was transforming. The era of great Western reclamation projects had begun. As William Smythe proclaimed in his influential 1900 book, The Conquest of Arid America, irrigation is a miracle. Across the American West, dams, reservoirs, aqueducts, and canals would bring water from where it was, in rivers like the Colorado, the Owens, the Snake, to where we wanted it, ensuring a new era of prosperity. Few places were better suited to embrace this miracle than the Imperial Valley. The Colorado River flowed only 60 miles to the east. In 1901, the California Development Company made a cut in the riverbank and directed the water into the valley. The developers gave the region a new, regal name, Imperial Valley, and began to sell land. Then calamity. The spring of 1905 was wet, and the Colorado River rose and flooded, overwhelming the hastily engineered cuts and canals to reroute itself into the valley, washing away homes and town sites and cropland, and creating a new large body of water, the Salton Sea. Flood after flood followed over the next 2 years. Harold Bell Wright knew a good story when he saw one. Holed up in his writer's studio, he plotted an epic tale of redemption by irrigation. His heroine, Barbara Worth, was orphaned as an infant when her parents died of thirst trying to cross the desert. Rescued, she becomes the adopted daughter of the valley's most prominent citizen, banker Jefferson Worth. Also present are 2 rivals for Barbara's hand, homespun local surveyor Abe Lee, and swag Eastern engineer Willard Holmes. There are gunfights and important telegrams, a biblical flood, and the happy ending when Barbara, a bit surprisingly, chooses Willard over Abe. Right hit pay dirt. Released in May of 1911, Barbara Worth was a phenomenon, becoming the third best-selling book of the year. Over the next 15 years, sales would reach nearly 3 million copies. To explain Barbara Worth's success, historian Kevin Starr noted that the novel tapped the amalgam of progressivism, profit, and religiosity so deeply lodged in the mainstream American identity of this era, all of which is true but ignores one other key component, Barbara Worth. Not since Helen Hunt Jackson's Ramona had a California heroine so captured America's heart. An expert writer, fluent in Spanish, Barbara is an Imperial Valley aristocrat with a democratic touch. Gazing out from the novel's cover, she is handsome rather than pretty, with strong features and piercing blue eyes, wearing a floppy sombrero and an expression at once dreamy and purposeful. The Harold Bell Wright Room of the Imperial Valley Pioneer Museum charts the ways Barbara vaulted from literary figure to cultural phenomenon. There are the labels for Barbara Worth brand Imperial Valley grapefruit. The test is in the taste. There is a sofa from the Barbara Worth Hotel, the opulent Spanish Renaissance hotel that opened in downtown El Centro in 1915, whose lobby featured 11 murals depicting scenes from the novel, and whose dining room menu offered chicken liver en brochette for 60 cents. By the time the hotel opened, the Colorado River had been pushed back into its former course, and a new network of canals created. The valley prospered. Across the state, major new reclamation projects were underway. Los Angeles pulling water from the Owens Valley, San Francisco making plans to draw it from Hetch Hetchy. Were Harold Bell Wright and Barbara Worth chiefly responsible for these and later engineered transformations of California? No, but they made reclamation heroic and romantic. In the summer of 1926, Samuel Goldwyn began production of a film version of The Winning of Barbara Worth, starring Vilma Banky as Barbara, Ronald Colman as Willard Holmes, and a newcomer, Gary Cooper, as Abe. On October 14, 1926, 200 elected officials, civic leaders, and reclamation experts from 13 western states gathered in Los Angeles for the conference, The Winning of the West, whose focus was bringing water to the region's arid lands. Among the conference highlights was attendance, by special invitation from Samuel Goldwyn, at the world premiere of his film, The Winning of Barbara Worth. So now we leap ahead to 2023 and the Imperial Valley and California and the West today. One of the things that surprises you about the Imperial Valley is how beautiful it is. Not everywhere. There are the sun-blasted strip malls and the highways too wide for anything they lead to. But then you see the sculpted mountains, the desert with its ocotillos and smoke trees, the sudden appearance of irrigated verdure, a Kelly green alfalfa field, a languid side canal, snaking past a grove of date palms, something from the Arabian Nights. What would happen if it all went away? You find yourself wondering that when you drive the valley after reading the newspaper stories about mega droughts and the new arid normalcy. What happens when the Salton Sea shrinks to nothing, when lettuce fields are abandoned and towns fade away? It is a question not just for the Imperial Valley, but for other valleys across California, across the West, all the places that bet big on the romance of reclamation pictured in The Winning of Barbara Worth. What happens when the romance ends? In a region where water is scarcer than we ever imagined it could be, which places do we keep and which do we abandon? It's easy to say about a forgotten writer's forgotten book, this is something we no longer need. It is harder to say that about somewhere you call home. Harold Bell Wright didn't stay that long in the valley that made him famous. In 1915, he was injured in a riding accident, then developed tuberculosis. He moved to Tucson, known as a haven for health seekers. He built a hacienda on 80 acres east of the city and continued to write. His fame would transfer to Tucson maps. Streets on the now subdivided estate are named for his books, among them Barbara Worth Drive. In the end, though, Wright returned to the Southern California he most loved, this time to Escondido. He continued to write, slowed by failing health until his death in 1944. He is buried in San Diego, in a courtyard in the Cathedral Mausoleum in Greenwood Memorial Park. His ashes were placed inside a copper urn, shaped like a book, set in sand from the Imperial Valley, beside a stone tablet inscribed with words from Isaiah. And the desert shall rejoice and blossom like the rose. Thank you.
So Peter's been an editor, but he can write, huh? Wow. And that's a novel that when he first mentioned it, what? Never heard of that book, you know? And see the power of books, all right? I mean, obviously, I'll come and say, you know, it led to this whole experiment of mass irrigation and so on, and it was only 100 years ago, so we could go back to the old Imperial Valley.
Yeah.
You know? All right, another hint on a question to ask Peter would be after Bell wrote Barbara Worth, he became more famous for something else, writing more things. Okay. You always want to, see the audience with some questions. Last but not least, another Z-Man, Matthew Zapruder, who is author of 5 collections of poetry. Most recently collection was Father's Day, as well as Why Poetry, a book of prose. He's editor-at-large at Wave Books. He's a professor at St. Mary's College of California. He served as guest editor of Best American Poetry. In 2022, he was editor of the New York Times Weekly Poems and the Sunday Magazine a couple years ago. In our current issue, we have a poem, so proud to publish, called Sunflower Poem, which he'll agreed to read tonight. I've also asked him to go back in 22 years ago, 2020, he wrote about the making of a poem was the name of an article where he talked about how he wrote a poem that he dedicated to Joanne Kiger. So hopefully you can read that too. And his current book, which is also up at the register, please buy his book. That we reviewed that in Alta Journal. David Yulin, our books editor, he wrote that Matthew Zapruder's second book of prose is a story of a poem, interweaves craft and memoir, poetry and essay to make something that defies form and genre, or better yet, reimagines them. So, set up for you.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming, thanks Blaze, and thanks Beth and Eliza. It's like really cool to always to do something for Alta, and this brings together 2 of my favorite San Francisco institutions, Green Apple and the Park, which is just like the beating heart of the city, may it always continue to beat, and Alta, which is just a treasure. And I think sometimes we might not realize how lucky we are here in the Bay Area, and not only to have all these great bookstores, but also we might have the last of the real editors, and both, in Alta and Ziziva and a few other publications where you can actually get edited. It's incredible. That doesn't happen otherwise. In my experience, and we're just so fortunate to have these publications, and particularly Alta, which is just, the first 2 readings were great, really, really cool pieces, and, serious pieces of journalism, or history, California history, written with like charm and, absolute perfect writing, and just like really necessary pieces, and, very characteristic of Alta. And now, you will have the amuse-bouche of the evening, 2 poems that have no research whatsoever, and will convey no necessary knowledge. I can promise you that. So as Blaze, I was one of those people who, had that idea at the beginning of the pandemic. I'm going to start a garden. It's great. I'm going to grow lots of shit. It's going to be awesome. So anyway, this poem kind of is the only thing that lasted from that endeavor. So I'll just, Blaze had asked me to write a little tiny introduction to the poem, which I'll read, and then I'll read the poem. Sunflower Poem. As the poem says, I had never really had the serious urge to garden. Then one day I felt compelled. I was so worried about my sunflowers growing at all that I did not realize the problem was that they would get too big and not be able to support the weight of their heads. It's just a myth that sunflowers turn to follow the sun. Apparently they always face east. As a transplant to California, always in danger of falling over from the useless weight of my thoughts, I can relate. So this is Sunflower Poem. I want to fall asleep in the middle of the afternoon, But I stand here in the yard, wondering why I planted the sunflowers yesterday all over the garden, knowing they would never grow nearly tall enough to penetrate the diurnal gloom or turn their heads to follow their lamp. I've never planted anything, but a voice kept saying now. So I went out into the yard like someone who wants the trees to think he has a plan, and desperately strewed the seeds. All afternoon, the leaves like green coins above my head in the single redwood my neighbors planted 60 years ago, so it is still young, made that sound. And the old skull cloud came to complain for too long about a handsome ice storm that promised to return last winter. The lamp softens all things it nears. Soon I will go near it, because I need to write the difficult letter that says enough. But first the skull says, it was you who planted these sunflowers, and now they are growing far too tall. Nothing can support that golden weight. Go slip through the chipped green gate to ask forgiveness of the forest. Some voice will answer, I was the one who came to you in a dream and told you put the seeds in the black soil, then forget the deeds of your enemies. You did one and not the other, and now those sunflowers will grow so tall their golden heads will fall into the earth, and unlike you, they will never die. Thank you. So as Blaise mentioned, I had sent this piece, which was kind of an essay about writing a poem sort of through its drafts and then arriving at the end of a poem, and it's dedicated to Joanne Kiger. I had gone to Hawaii to teach. If you're a writer, you get invited to fancy places to teach and paid a pittance, but it doesn't matter because you're in a fancy place. So I was in Hawaii, actually staying in like a weird kind of like Boy Scout camp. So that was weird. Anyway, but it was in a beautiful spot. So I went on a long walk, and I was thinking I had brought Kiger's essays, her journals of her travels through Japan and then India. So Joanne Kiger, if you don't know, she was sort of a wunderkind of American poetry, young star who met Gary Snyder, sort of impulsively married him. They went to Japan together. He was studying Zen. They lived in Japan. He was kind of a dick and like made her like do all the household chores, while he would like meditate all day. And so she writes about that a lot in her journals. And then they went to India, and they met up with Allen Ginsberg in India. And so her journals are amazing. And so I highly recommend them. But anyway, so I wrote this piece and this poem as part of a larger project that ended up being this story of a poem, which traces the writing of one poem from beginning to end, and a lot of other things with memoir. And this was written kind of as part of that process, but it didn't fit in the book, but I liked it as a standalone piece, so it was lovely to have it in Alta, and I'm very grateful. So I will read it, and I think all you need to know is the name of Kiger's journals is called Strange Big Moon. So I mentioned it. And it's called Exo is My Aloha. Exo is my aloha. On the north side of the island, where all the surfers try not to die, I went for a long, difficult walk through thick sand. I was thinking the whole time it will be hard to return, but kept moving forward. I stopped and picked up a white coral, knocked off from some bits of sand, put it in my pocket and carried it a long way back to place on her book called Strange Big Moon. Felt like a rhyme she would not have liked. Little moonstone on the picture of the moon. Ominous white stone covering the moon to make the dark darker. Somewhere out there, sea turtles were swimming. I'd seen two earlier, floating stones with tiny heads like socks. I placed that little round coral, pitted and crumbling, on the cover of the paperback. It looked like a man, but would not stand up. I wanted to put it next to two other ones, but all my plans are vague. The world's suggestion was the strong wind coming through the curtains all the way from no one knows. So I used it to hold down her journals from Kyoto, containing her past and others, almost all gone except Snyder, who made her do the dishes. What a jerk. She did it anyway. They whitewashed the walls, put up straw panels into which they cut small holes for Fudo and Rousseau, their cats, then left for India to meet the famous manic jackass Ginsberg. Kyoto means capital city. Line above that O, I can't help thinking is like a cloud. I have no journals and the memory of a candle. So when I love something, I keep it here. I met her once, and she gave me a blue card with her email on it. I never used. Now that she's dead, I've placed a coral on top of the book, and then left the room to come back here to face my music. Back there, the curtain's still blowing, and her thoughts won't even remain. Thank you.
So we're going to have a little Q&A with the three contributors, Keenan, Peter, and Matthew. Thank you so much to the three of you. And also, if you want to refresh your water, wine, or anything, please help yourselves. And
So you're at San Jose State?
I am.
Fully on the St. Mary's. What's that? I'm at St. Mary's.
Oh, okay.
And what department?
I'm in English and
Oh yeah, we should have coffee.
absolutely. I was exchange.
First shot down this side.
Just catch up.
But yeah, I know Chris.
Oh, Chris is that. It's funny. He just got texted me. We're at the race today. Chris is the best.
Are you going to come hang out?
Okay. We'll work it out.
All right, so Peter's going to come up, and Matthew, and Keenan, would you guys come back on
You're out of
the hot seat?
I don't know.
I know you guys know there's at least two questions coming. I hope everybody hears. And again, please introduce yourselves to each other and say So Matthew had mentioned, Ziziva, which we're great friends with everyone over there, and then there's also the Believer, Zoetrope, McSweeney's. There's a lot of great things happening in terms of Bay Area publications, I should say, magazines, journals. Stranger's Guide, that's what I was thinking about. Oh, that's better? Okay. So, I'm sure there's probably some copies also in the front of those publications, which if you want to support somebody, please do. So, questions for our esteemed contributors tonight? Right there, yes, please.
Sure, I could ask everybody, but anyway, about community colleges, can you say something about maybe something in the Central Valley or one of the other non-urban or North San Francisco or colleges? And also, do you have any information, or did you find any on what percentage of community college students go on to finished degrees or go on to jobs that actually use what they've learned in the two-year programs?
Okay, so thank you for your question. So within the course of the essay, I traveled not only to San Diego and to Los Angeles, where I visited East Los Angeles College, but also to Fresno, where I go to Fresno CC, and then out to Sonora, California, in Gold Country, where I visit Columbia College. So both of those are, you fit the description that you laid out there. In fact, much of my family is from Fresno, and so in that part of the essay, that section of the essay, I talk about my mother's side of the family. Their work as field hands, going back to the mid 20th century, the vast inequity and injustice that they experienced, and how community college was the kind of the first rung of the ladder that helped to really pull my family out of poverty, right? So so that's the first thing I can say to that. In terms of percentages, I don't have an exact percentage for you. I can tell you that it's well less than half, right? Move on to getting 4-year degrees of the total community college student population. But, especially if you talk to administrators and faculty at community colleges, we have a we take issue with the ways that fact is interpreted, because one, a lot of people, unlike universities, a lot of people go to community colleges without the goal of transferring and getting a 4-year degree, right? And so it's not really fair to judge community colleges on the metric of a university in the first place. But because it's the easiest metric upon which to judge a college, a lot of taxpayer funding, which the taxpayer funding that fuels community colleges, is that's the leverage, the mechanism that is used oftentimes to defund community colleges, right? So it's really problematic. What we need is much more specific research into the students' goals when they enter community college, right? And then whether they achieve those goals or not.
Yeah, I agree. That's why part of my question was about what, I guess we need more data, since you say we don't have it, on what do students what percentage use what they've learned in that 2-year, which can be paraprofessional or trade, to get a job that uses what they've learned is in addition to this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Someone else?
For Keenan again, with a little prompt.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, someone was listening.
What was the school that you went to after San Diego? Pray tell.
Oh, yeah. I went to East Los Angeles College in East LA. And to Blaze's question, yes, I also Googled Los Angeles CC, and yes, again, the country club came up first. Pretty much any city, if you do this, the country club is going to come up first. So take that for what you will.
But wait, that was the episode of Larry David, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. The Los Angeles country. And so those figures, those dollar figures I quoted you, just multiply them by 5. And that's your average. Well, not your average, but those are the high-end Los Angeles country clubs.
What handicap did you decide that you should have? I'm just curious.
I don't know anything about golf.
I didn't want to understand the answer to the question anyway. My handicap's $1 million, actually.
The higher the better, right?
$1 million plus one.
Steve?
Well, just a brief comment. I so found refreshing in your approach, without ever breathing the word class. I so appreciated the fact that a ardent attention to what class represents in a state whose essential conceit is that it doesn't matter, was entirely a useful lens, as it seemed to me, for you to make this deep dive into who benefits, who doesn't, and how this archipelago of pedagogical instruction occurs, and who gets into the system and what happens to them when they do. I found it very refreshing.
Thank you.
Somebody? How about, yeah, please.
I have a question about, the Salton Sea and the fact that all of those green alfalfa fields, all of the runoff from that has gone into the Salton Sea and has created a toxic underpinning that with the eventual aridification, it doesn't return to how it was.
Yeah, that's one of the, obviously the most, most critical environmental crisis in the Imperial Valley, which is a land of environmental crisis. And one of the people I talked to for this article was Frank Ruiz, who is Audubon's director of sort of the Salton Sea program. It's a real problem. The sea exists only because of excess water from the Colorado River. And now, over the last 15 years, as the Colorado River has less and less excess water, it has dried up. So yes, you get I remember doing stories for Sunset in the 80s and 90s there, and at that point it was still a very viable habitat for waterfowl on the Pacific Flyway, because it wasn't so saline and you didn't have the buildup of toxins. So it had brine shrimp and all the stuff that birds would eat. Those days are just gone. And I was stunned when I visited there this summer on how much smaller the sea was and just how dead it looked. So one of the grim things, facts of life about the West is that these dry lake beds, and as Frank Ruiz told me when I was interviewing him, it's not just the Salton Sea, it's Mono Lake, it's the Great Salt Lake in Utah. As the interior West dries up, we don't have an easy way of fixing this. It depends on water, unless we get a whole bunch of years like we had this past winter of lavish rainfall, that they're going to go away. And the other bad thing about the Salton Sea in particular is that Imperial County already has the highest asthma rate of any county in California, because you get these giant clouds of dust coming up from the lake bed. So if the lake continues to dry, what do you do with that? It's a real problem. So.
Peter, what's your take on Mono Lake?
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
What's your take on Mono Lake?
Oh gosh, I mean it's the same set of issues, you know. I don't know. I mean, LA obviously is continuing to draw water from it, but there again, the whole you said your late husband was a water expert. I'm actually not a water expert. I've written about it for a long time, but I'm not a hydrologist or a water rights lawyer. But the whole system of irrigation dams and irrigation in the West was predicated on a climate regime that may actually no longer exist. And that would be the course of Mono Lake and the water going down the LA Aqueduct to LA too. You know, it depends on water runoff from the Sierra. So, it doesn't seem as critical right now as other parts of the West, but it's not in good shape. So.
Thank you.
I would like to piggyback on that too. You said the idea of reclamation became heroic and romantic, and I'm sure that was accidental, right? There wasn't like a lobby then that went out to do this, but I'm wondering if you have...
The story of reclamation and irrigation in the West, because it was mainly a Western thing, I've found fascinating since I was in college. Mm-hmm. And if you read books like Norris Hundley's The Great Thirst, which is California irrigation, Donald Worcester's Rivers of Empire, Cadillac Desert by Mark, going back to Joseph Smith and the Mormons in the Great Salt Lake Valley, reclaiming Western deserts was linked really strongly to a Protestant or Mormon faith in turning the West into a biblical Garden of Eden. And those two strands are almost inseparable. And because Harold Millwright started out his life as a preacher, they're really strong in this book. To reclaim the desert was equal of reclaiming souls. Okay. And it may seem insane to us now, but that was one of the, again, you had really strong economic reasons, land sales, to bring in water to places like the Imperial Valley or the desert around Yuma or wherever. But there was this religious, romantic aspect to the movement too that was enormously powerful.
So what I was wondering is, if while you were writing that, and thanks for clarifying that for me, that it was actually, there was more intention behind it than not. If there's something that you could imagine us doing to go the other way, say if we're going to have to let some of these places desertify, and they're going to be filthy, and there's not going to be. We're going to have to become comfortable with loss and expense. Is there something that you could imagine, a story, a new myth, a new romance that could come on top and reverse this?
I hope so, because that's going to be what we're facing. I mean, if you just last week, the feds, I think it's 1.5 billion, they are paying Western states 1.5 billion to make up for California, Nevada, and Arizona reducing its water use by, I can't remember how many millions of acre feet. And that will go to paying farmers in the Imperial Valley to take crops out of production, maybe replacing alfalfa with other crops. And that's only just for the next 3 years. So one of the things that the story got into, that I only slightly into the reading, but the challenge with that is you have whole communities that have depended on this, and if you just suddenly say, we're pulling the rug out from under you, your whole economic basis of being, if you live in El Centro or Brawley or Yuma, we're pulling the rug out from under you. Well, that's going to be a real recipe for sort of social unrest. So we actually are going to have to figure out how to do this, and I don't know what the way is going to be. So.
Somebody else? Yes, please.
If you were to, this is about community college and sort of more of a travel question. If there was a community college that you could attend that just seemed like a fun place to go, which one would you pick?
That's for everyone. Go around the whole room.
Right. Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you. Well, I would say that I would go first to College of Alameda, because that was the first community college that I taught at. It was my first college teaching job. And that's a beautiful campus, right? But there are many others. Staying like in the East Bay, Oakland area, actually in Oakland itself, Merritt College has like the best view of any place in Oakland. So I'd go there as well.
Anybody, you guys want to answer that?
I think Santa Barbara City College is really beautiful.
No, I was just thinking when you were saying, I was thinking about when I taught at Cal for a semester, and I had a bunch of students in my classes. Javier Zamora was actually in my class, but there were students. I had a lot of students who had been at community colleges and transferred into Cal, and they were a lot of my strongest students. And I got a sense really for the first time of like how important that mechanism of social mobility is. To get somebody from wherever they're at in the community college and at Cal, with a degree in Cal, that's a big deal. You can do a lot with that, and so it just I knew how important that system was for making California a great state to the extent it has been one, and that it was really dependent on the economic, mobility aspect of it. But I saw it firsthand, actually experienced it, and it was really kind of a life-changing thing. And so, I've always been really, a proponent of community college, even though I teach at a private college, but probably maybe even especially because I teach at a private college. I see the limitations of that situation and how exclusive it is. Even no matter the best efforts of the people who run the institutions, it's still an exclusive place, and it's not the same as community colleges. So, I'm glad you're doing that work and did that work, and thank you for writing that.
Thank you for your work.
I have a question for you. Tell me your name again.
Matthew.
Matthew. I really enjoyed your poem and your piece, and wanted to ask you a bit about how the pandemic shaped some of the emotional availability you had to think through aspects of perhaps your life or your mortality or your directionality or orientation or heavy head through the sunflower, and then the kind of like parchment work of this young woman's diaries and her life and these interactions. And a lot of men don't care if the woman is doing the dishes. That was sort of the way it was, right? It's not like he's a jerk, perhaps he's just a guy. And so just that's how.
I wouldn't fly at my house.
Well, not today, but like in the 70s and 80s when I grew up, it was very normal. And many cultures that I visited as an anthropologist, right? It's very normal to just watch the women doing things. So anyway, I'm just wondering, like, what, in terms of the pandemic as a kind of container, if you will, opened you in a different way, if that happened for you as a poet?
Well, thank you for that question. Just on the matter of the domestic tasks, a part of it is too is because it's Gary Snyder, who's sort of like a hero here in this area. So like, we kind of essentially read like 70 pages of him like being kind of a jerk. I mean, like, I know it might have been culturally normal, but he really just basically treated her like kind of like the domestic help, and it was kind of funny because he's sort of worshipped around here justifiably. But
and he's doing it while meditating. That's what got
I know. Well, no, it really the
spaciousness
irony
of
of it announces itself. Believe me, but but they're great. So anyway, I was going to say the poet Denise Levertop. I saw a documentary about her once, and she said she'd won a Guggenheim, and they asked, and they said, well, what did you do with your Guggenheim? She said, oh, yeah, that was easy. I bought a washing machine. Because then she had like 3 extra hours a day, basically, to write, and she was just like that. So the economics and the structure of it is interesting to me. But thanks for your question about the pandemic. I mean, like everybody, my routines, my whole mood, everything was completely obliterated. And one thing that happened was that, being at home was kind of feels like a refuge to me and a place of creativity, but because we were stuck at home, there was no tension, there was no way to get outside of your experience to think about what was happening or move back and forth among environments. And so it was really hard to write for me because I think I'm a poet like who distance from place helps me, so I can almost stand outside my experience and look down at it. So that was a really, really, really hard thing, and just being worried, sick all the time too didn't help. But yeah, no, it was tough. And then eventually a few things came out. I also I wrote a fair number of pandemic poems that are kind of depressing, and I just was like, I edited Best American Poetry, like Blaze said, and I read a lot of depressing pandemic poems, many of which were really good, and some of which I included in thing. But I was like, I'm not sure that I need to contribute to this corpus of literature of like that was a really shitty time and we were all terrified. So a lot of those poems have kind of gone. But the thing, maybe this poem will survive because it has at least like a tiny bit of a sense of humor about its own experience. So hopefully that mitigates it somewhat. So. But thank you for the question.
Roberta has a question here.
Oh, yeah.
Matthew, what are you trying to accomplish with an intense focus on a single poem at a moment of hyper ADHD that we live in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had this instinct that, I'm going to confess something to you all, which is that I sometimes get a little frustrated with poetry as a genre. I mean, I love writing poems, I love making poems, but I want to kind of cover material in a different sort of way. So I write prose too, but that also feels limiting to me too a little bit. And I think both of them have to do with time. A poem is so much about an instant of time, and that's what makes it so powerful a lot of the time. But it's kind of like one thing, and so it's hard to. Not impossible, but it's difficult sometimes to give a sense of the flow of time in a poem. And prose has sort of the opposite poem in a way, and that's its strength and limitation. So I was thinking, is there a way to write that you can do both things, where you can have that sort of like this bursts of like imminence, and then like talk about how they came to be and do things with time, in the writing. So I think that's what kind of interested me about doing it. It's funny because there's been a lot of stuff about AI. I don't know if you've noticed, but people are asking about that. And I've been interviewed a couple times, and people are like, they ask me like it's the first time anybody's ever asked this question, like, so what's it going to be like to be out of business as a poet? I'm like, first of all, there's no in business as a poet. Okay? So it's like, no, it's not going to stop me from writing at some computers, right? But second of all, I was like, the biggest problem is when you're like stuck in the. You're going to go into a cafe and you're going to see like an old Macintosh computer like crying because it fell in love with like another computer and like writing poems about it. Anyway, but yeah. So anyway, I don't know. The question was about why show your work. And the answer is because I thought it would be cool to sort of open up the process and just sort of see what kind of new things could be done with time and understanding in that way. So I don't know. You have to see if you think it worked or not. But
Check it out. Story of a poem. Yeah, it's a really thing. All right, we have last question. I'm sorry, just read one more question because it's we would like to then we'll do this one last question.
Yeah.
Then everyone will go buy books and magazines and drink more wine and water. And then when Carr kicks us out, when it's time to, if we want to keep talking, which we'd love to do that, around the corner there's a place called Little Shamrock. We can just kind of migrate there and continue. But so, I'm sorry, please.
This should help maybe with the buying of the books. Since Matthew just did a bunch of editing and was also kind of sending us an homage to Joanne Kiger, and you're celebrating our least known writer, who are some California writers that you think we should be paying attention to?
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Okay.
Other than yourselves.
I certainly wouldn't start there. Let me see. It's a really good question. Well, Layla Motley, right? Night crawling. Not enough has been written about Oakland, and so novels set in Oakland are I care a lot about them, so I could start there.
I'll think of two, and Gordo, which you guys have praised lavishly. Now I can't remember the author's name. I just love that book. It's so good. It's such a wonderful book.
Laugh out loud. Yeah.
And then my other favorite, honestly, I'm a big sort of crime detective fan, and I just love Steph Charge or House Rope. I think it's such a great Los Angeles book. It's a really strong book.
I always, every time anybody asks for a recommendation, like everything I've ever read, like flies out of my head. I guess when you said Oakland books, I mean, to me, the quintessential Oakland, at least recent Oakland novel is Tommy Orange's book, which you probably all, if you haven't read that book, it's really just a knockout. I think kind of like already like a classic of like the East Bay literary history. And so I'd say that, and Brenda Hillman, again, like quintessential California poet, California author, has a recent book out that's just, I think it's her best book. And so I would just mention those two, which again, I'm sure you've heard of those people, but just to put a little.
So, all right, I said we'd have one last, that was the last question, but Steve Wasserman, who you should also ask, he's publisher of Heyday, so ask him what books.
I can't help. So those, excellent things. So what's a book about California, or some aspect of California, which nobody has written yet, but which should exist, and it's hiding there in plain sight, and you feel it like a pain in your side when you wait. Why has no one yet written this book? So what is that book for you?
Biography of Draymond Green? I don't know. That's the book I want to read. Speaking of it, I am reading The Alone Way, which is, one of the best California books. So
What was that?
The Alone Way. It's by it's I think, an essential work of California literature by the original publisher, I guess, of Heyday, right? So,
Yeah,
Malcolm, yeah.
A book that is yet to be written. There are. I'm the coordinator of our Steinbeck Fellows program at San Jose State. I have learned a lot. I revere Steinbeck as a writer. At the same time, I've learned a lot about the issues and history of California agriculture, right? Not just my family, but the stories my students are telling, the stories that Steinbeck Fellows are telling about this history, about the Filipino history, the Black history, the Chinese history, right, of the Central Valley and of of the Bay Area as well, the Outer Bay Area. Those stories of like agrarian injustice need to be told.
For me, I'd love for somebody to be the Carrie McWilliams of 2023 and do a Southern California island on a land and cover California culture with the same breadth but eye for detail and what it's like now, 90 years after he wrote those books. Yeah, I'd like that.
And I'll give one serious answer, which is that my wife works at Spur, which is an urban planning think tank in San Francisco, and she's a policy director there, she's and so has been there a long time. And I'm always trying to get her to write this book, which is basically explaining the housing crisis and the housing situation in San Francisco and in the Bay Area in a way that would be reasonable for a reasonably interested person to read. And I know a lot of people have written a lot of great things about this, but I think I haven't seen that book where it's just a person writing about what the hell is going on here and why and what we can do. And I keep trying to get her to write that book, and she won't listen to me. But, yeah. But getting to sit with her at the dinner table is pretty great. So.
Great. Well, so one last shameless plug for Alta.
Yes.
Two things. One, we were talking a lot about the Colorado River and the deal that was struck in the next issue of Alta, which is at the printing press now. If those of you who there's a book called The Monkey Wrench Gang by Edward Abbey, and there's a character named George Washington Haydu who wanted to blow up the Glen Canyon Dam and let the river flow again. So he wrote an opening piece for us about just letting, draining Lake Powell is the headline. And the second thing is in that, also the next issue, is a cover package about, or a series of stories about housing. And it's called Gimme Shelter. So we're thinking the same things here. And then finally, just a big thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. Big thanks to Keenan and Peter and Matthew. So many other contributors too. So please introduce yourself to each other. Some more wine and books for sale by the cash register, please. Single issue copies or subscriptions. Get a hat. Go home with a bookstore guide too. And we'll stay here for a bit, and then those who still want to hang out, we'll go around the corner. So, thank you, everybody. Card, anything? Okay, thanks, everybody.